Good afternoon, everybody. Over the last few weeks, I've been working with leaders of both parties on a proposal to get our deficit under control, avoid tax cuts or avoid tax hikes on the middle class, and to make sure that we can spur jobs and economic growth. A balanced proposal that cuts spending but also asks the wealthiest Americans to pay more. A proposal that will strengthen the middle class over the long haul and grow our economy over the long haul. During the course of these negotiations, I offered to compromise with Republicans in Congress. I met them halfway on taxes, and I met them more than halfway on spending. And in terms of actual dollar amounts, we're not that far apart. As of today, I am still ready and willing to get a comprehensive package done. I still believe that reducing our deficit is the right thing to do for the long-term health of our economy and the confidence of our businesses. I remain committed to working towards that goal, whether it happens all at once or whether it happens in several different steps. But in 10 days, we face a deadline. In 10 days, under current law, tax rates are scheduled to rise on most Americans. And even though Democrats and Republicans are arguing about whether those rates should go up for the wealthiest individuals, all of us, every single one of us, agrees that tax rates shouldn't go up for the other 98% of Americans, which includes 97% of small businesses. Every member of Congress believes that, every Democrat, every Republican. So there is absolutely no reason, none, not to protect these Americans from a tax hike. At the very least, let's agree right now on what we already agree on. Let's get that done. I just spoke to Speaker Boehner, and I also met with Senator Reid. In the next few days, I've asked leaders of Congress to work towards a package that prevents a tax hike on middle-class Americans, protects unemployment insurance for 2 million Americans, and lays the groundwork for further work on both growth and deficit reduction. That's an achievable goal. That can get done in 10 days. Once this legislation is agreed to, I expect Democrats and Republicans to get back to Washington and have it pass both chambers. And I will immediately sign that legislation into law before January 1st of next year. It's that simple. Averting this middle-class tax hike is not a Democratic responsibility or a Republican responsibility. With their votes, the American people have determined that governing is a shared responsibility between both parties. In this Congress, laws can only pass with support from Democrats and Republicans, and that means nobody gets 100% of what they want. Everybody's got to give a little bit in a sensible way. We move forward together, or we don't move forward at all. So, as we leave town for a few days to be with our families for the holidays, I hope it gives everybody some perspective. Everybody can cool off. Everybody can drink some eggnog, have some Christmas cookies, sing some Christmas carols, enjoy the company of loved ones. And then I'd ask every member of Congress, while they're back home, to think about that. Think about the obligations we have to the people who sent us here. Think about the hardship that so many Americans will endure if Congress does nothing at all. Just as our economy is really starting to recover, and we're starting to see optimistic signs, and we've seen actually some upside statistics from a whole range of areas, including housing. Now's not the time for more self-inflicted wounds. Certainly not those coming from Washington. And there's so much more work to be done in this country on jobs and on incomes, education and energy. We're a week away from one of the worst tragedies in memory. So we've got work to do on gun safety, a host of other issues. These are all challenges that we can meet. They're all challenges that we have to meet if we want our kids to grow up in an America that's full of opportunity and possibility, as much opportunity and possibility as the America that our parents and our grandparents left for us. But we're only going to be able to do it together. We're going to have to find some common ground. And the challenge that we've got right now is that the American people are a lot more sensible and a lot more thoughtful and much more willing to compromise and give and sacrifice and act responsibly than their elected representatives are. And that's a problem. There's a mismatch right now between how everybody else is thinking about these problems, Democrats and Republicans, outside of this town, and how folks are operating here. And we've just got to get that aligned. But we've only got 10 days to do it. So I hope that every member of Congress is thinking about that. Nobody can get 100% of what they want. And this is not simply a contest between parties in terms of who looks good and who doesn't. There are real world consequences to what we do here. And I want next year to be a year of strong economic growth. I want next year to be a year in which more jobs are created and more businesses are started. And we're making progress on all the challenges that we have out there, some of which, by the way, we don't have as much control over as we have in terms of just shaping a sensible budget. This is something within our capacity to solve. It doesn't take that much work. We just have to do the right thing. So call me a hopeless optimist, but I actually still think we can get it done. And with that, I want to wish every American a Merry Christmas. And, because we didn't get this done, I will see you next week.
Sir,
all right?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the past couple of months, I've been working with leaders of both parties to try and forge an agreement that would grow our economy and shrink the deficit. A balanced plan that would cut spending in a responsible way, but also ask the wealthiest Americans to pay a little more. And above all, protect our middle class and everybody who's striving to get into the middle class. I still want to get this done. It's the right thing to do for our families, for our businesses, and for our entire economy. But the hour for immediate action is here. It is now. We're now at the point where in just 4 days, every American's tax rates are scheduled to go up by law. Every American's paycheck will get considerably smaller. And that would be the wrong thing to do for our economy. It would be bad for middle-class families, and it would be bad for businesses that depend on family spending. Fortunately, Congress can prevent it from happening if they act right now. I just had a good and constructive discussion here at the White House with Senate and House leadership about how to prevent this tax hike on the middle class. And I'm optimistic we may still be able to reach an agreement that can pass both houses in time. Senators Reid and McConnell are working on such an agreement as we speak. But if an agreement isn't reached in time between Senator Reid and Senator McConnell, then I will urge Senator Reid to bring to the floor a basic package for an up or down vote, one that protects the middle class from an income tax hike, extends the vital lifeline of unemployment insurance to 2 million Americans looking for a job, and lays the groundwork for future cooperation on more economic growth and deficit reduction. Guys, I can hear you over here. I believe such a proposal could pass both houses with bipartisan majorities, as long as those leaders allow it to actually come to a vote. If members of the House or the Senate want to vote no, they can. But we should let everybody vote. That's the way this is supposed to work. If you can get a majority in the House and you can get a majority in the Senate, then we should be able to pass a bill. So the American people are watching what we do here. Obviously, their patience is already thin. This is deja vu all over again. America wonders why it is that in this town, for some reason, you can't get stuff done in an organized timetable. Why everything always has to wait till the last minute? Well, we're now at the last minute. And the American people are not going to have any patience for a politically self-inflicted wound to our economy. Not right now. The economy is growing, but sustaining that trend is going to require elected officials to do their jobs. The housing market is recovering, but that could be impacted if folks are seeing smaller paychecks. The unemployment rate is the lowest it's been since 2008. But already you're seeing businesses and consumers starting to hold back because of the dysfunction that they see in Washington. Economists, business leaders, all think that we're poised to grow in 2013, as long as politics in Washington don't get in the way of America's progress. So we've got to get this done. I just want to repeat, we had a constructive meeting today. Senators Reid and McConnell are discussing a potential agreement where we could get a bipartisan bill out of the Senate, over to the House, and done in a timely fashion so that we met the December 31st deadline. But given how things have been working in this town, we always have to wait and see until it actually happens. The one thing that the American people should not have to wait and see is some sort of action. So if we don't see an agreement between the two leaders in the Senate, I expect a bill to go on the floor, and I've asked Senator Reid to do this, put a bill on the floor that makes sure that taxes on middle-class families don't go up, that unemployment insurance is still available for 2 million people, and that lays the groundwork then for additional deficit reduction and economic growth steps that we can take in the new year. But let's not miss this deadline. That's the bare minimum that we should be able to get done. And it shouldn't be that hard, since Democrats and Republicans both say they don't want to see taxes go up on middle-class families. And I just have to repeat, outside of Washington, nobody understands how it is that this seems to be a repeat pattern over and over again. Ordinary folks, they do their jobs. They meet deadlines. They sit down and they discuss things, and then things happen. If there are disagreements, they sort through the disagreements. The notion that our elected leadership can't do the same thing is mind-boggling to them. It needs to stop. So I'm modestly optimistic that an agreement can be achieved. Nobody's going to get 100% of what they want, but let's make sure that middle-class families and the American economy, and in fact the world economy, aren't adversely impacted because people can't do their jobs. All right? Thank you very much, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Please, everybody have a seat. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the White House. Now, I realize that the last thing you want to hear on New Year's Eve is another speech from me. But I do need to talk about the progress that's being made in Congress today. For the last few days, leaders in both parties have been working toward an agreement that will prevent a middle-class tax hike from hitting 98% of all Americans starting tomorrow. Preventing that tax hike has been my top priority, because the last thing folks like the folks up here on this stage can afford right now is to pay an extra $2,000 in taxes next year. Middle-class families can't afford it. Businesses can't afford it. Our economy can't afford it. Now, today, it appears that an agreement to prevent this New Year's tax hike is within sight, but it's not done. There are still issues left to resolve, but we're hopeful that Congress can get it done. But it's not done. And so part of the reason that I wanted to speak to all of you here today is to make sure that we emphasize to Congress, and that members of both parties understand that all across America, this is a pressing concern on people's minds. Now, the potential agreement that's being talked about would not only make sure that taxes don't go up on middle-class families, it also would extend tax credits for families with children. It would extend our tuition tax credit that's helped millions of families pay for college. It would extend tax credits for clean energy companies that are creating jobs and reducing our dependence on foreign oil. It would extend unemployment insurance to 2 million Americans who are out there still actively looking for a job. Now, I have to say that ever since I took office, throughout the campaign, and over the last couple of months, my preference would have been to solve all these problems in the context of a larger agreement, a bigger deal, a grand bargain, whatever you want to call it, that solves our deficit problems in a balanced and responsible way, that doesn't just deal with the taxes, but deals with the spending in a balanced way so that we can put all this behind us and just focusing on growing our economy. But with this Congress, that was obviously a little too much to hope for at this time. It may be we can do it in stages. We're going to solve this problem instead in several steps. Last year, in 2011, we started reducing the deficit through $1 trillion in spending cuts. Those have already taken place. The agreement being worked on right now would further reduce the deficit by asking the wealthiest 2% of Americans to pay higher taxes for the first time in 2 decades. So that would add additional hundreds of billions of dollars to deficit reduction. So that's progress, but we're going to need to do more. You know, keep in mind that just last month, Republicans in Congress said they would never agree to raise tax rates on the wealthiest Americans. Obviously, the agreement that's currently being discussed would raise those rates and raise them permanently. Now, but keep in mind, we're going to still have more work to do. We still have deficits that have to be dealt with. We're still going to have to think about how we put our economy on a long-term trajectory of growth, how we continue to make investments in things like education, things like infrastructure that help our economy grow. And keep in mind that the threat of tax hikes going up is only one part of this so-called fiscal cliff that everybody's been talking about. What we also have facing us starting tomorrow are automatic spending cuts that are scheduled to go into effect. And keep in mind that some of these spending cuts that Congress has said will automatically go into effect have an impact on our Defense Department, but they also have an impact on things like Head Start. And so there are some programs that are scheduled to be cut that we're using an axe instead of a scalpel. May not always be the smartest cuts. And so that is a piece of business that still has to be taken care of. And I want to make clear that any agreement we have to deal with these automatic spending cuts that are being threatened for next month, those also have to be balanced. Because remember, my principle has always been, let's do things in a balanced, responsible way. And that means that revenues have to be part of the equation in turning off the sequester, in eliminating these automatic spending cuts, as well as spending cuts. Now, the same is true for any future deficit agreement. Obviously, we're going to have to do more to reduce our debt and our deficit. I'm willing to do more, but it's going to have to be balanced. We're going to have to do it in a balanced, responsible way. For example, I'm willing to reduce our government's Medicare bills by finding new ways to reduce the cost of health care in this country. That's something that we all should agree on. You know, we want to make sure that Medicare is there for future generations. But the current trajectory of health care costs is going up so high, we've got to find ways to make sure that it's sustainable. But that kind of reform has to go hand in hand with doing some more work to reform our tax code so that wealthy individuals, the biggest corporations, can't take advantage of loopholes and deductions that aren't available to most of the folks standing up here, aren't available to most Americans. So there's still more work to be done in the tax code to make it fairer, even as we're also looking at how we can strengthen something like Medicare. Now, if Republicans think that I will finish the job of deficit reduction through spending cuts alone, and you hear that sometimes coming from them, that sort of after today, we're just going to try to shove only spending cuts down, shove spending cuts at us that will hurt seniors or hurt students or hurt middle-class families without asking also equivalent sacrifice from millionaires or companies with a lot of lobbyists, et cetera. If they think that's going to be the formula for how we solve this thing, then they've got another thing coming. That's not how it's going to work. We've got to do this in a balanced and responsible way, and if we're going to be serious about deficit reduction and debt reduction, then it's going to have to be a matter of shared sacrifice, at least as long as I'm president. And I'm going to be president for the next 4 years, I hope. Anyway, for now, our most immediate priority is to stop taxes going up for middle-class families starting tomorrow. I think that is a modest goal that we can accomplish. Democrats and Republicans in Congress have to get this done, but they're not there yet. They are close, but they're not there yet. And one thing we can count on with respect to this Congress is that if there's even 1 second left before you have to do what you're supposed to do, they will use that last second. So, as of this point, it looks like I'm going to be spending New Year's here in D.C. Y'all are going to be hanging out in D.C. too, right? I can come to your house? Is that what you said? I don't want to spoil the party. But the people who are with me here today, the people who are watching at home, they need our leaders in Congress to succeed. They need us to all stay focused on them, not on politics, not on special interests. They need to be focused on families, students, grandmas, folks who are out there working really, really hard and are just looking for a fair shot and some reward for that hard work. They expect our leaders to succeed on their behalf. So do I. And so keep the pressure on over the next 12 hours or so. Let's see if we can get this thing done. And I thank you all. And if I don't see you, if I don't show up at your house, I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Thank you very much. All right. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, President.
A central premise of my campaign for president was to change the tax code that was too skewed towards the wealthy at the expense of working middle-class Americans. Tonight, we've done that. Thanks to the votes of Democrats and Republicans in Congress, I will sign a law that raises taxes on the wealthiest 2% of Americans while preventing a middle-class tax hike that could have sent the economy back into recession and obviously had a severe impact on families all across America. I want to thank all the leaders of the House and Senate. In particular, I want to thank the work that was done by my extraordinary Vice President Joe Biden, as well as Leader Harry Reid, Speaker Boehner, Nancy Pelosi, and Mitch McConnell. Everybody worked very hard on this, and I appreciate it. And Joe, once again, I want to thank you for your great work. Under this law, more than 98% of Americans and 97% of small businesses will not see their income taxes go up. Millions of families will continue to receive tax credits to help raise their kids and send them to college. Companies will continue to receive tax credits for the research that they do, the investments they make, and the clean energy jobs that they create. And 2 million Americans who are out of work, but out there looking, pounding the pavement every day, are going to continue to receive unemployment benefits as long as they're actively looking for a job. But I think we all recognize this law is just one step in the broader effort to strengthen our economy and broaden opportunity for everybody. The fact is the deficit is still too high, and we're still investing too little in the things that we need for the economy to grow as fast as it should. And that's why Speaker Boehner and I originally tried to negotiate a larger agreement that would put this country on a path to paying down its debt while also putting Americans back to work, rebuilding our roads and bridges, and providing investments in areas like education and job training. Unfortunately, there just wasn't enough support or time for that kind of large agreement in a lame duck session of Congress. And that failure comes with a cost, as the messy nature of the process over the past several weeks has made business more uncertain and consumers less confident. But we are continuing to chip away at this problem, step by step. Last year, I signed into law $1.7 trillion in deficit reduction. Tonight's agreement further reduces the deficit by raising $620 billion in revenue from the wealthiest households in America. And there will be more deficit reduction as Congress decides what to do about the automatic spending cuts that we have now delayed for 2 months. I want to make this point. As I've demonstrated throughout the past several weeks, I am very open to compromise. I agree with Democrats and Republicans that the aging population and the rising cost of health care makes Medicare the biggest contributor to our deficit. I believe we've got to find ways to reform that program without hurting seniors who count on it to survive. And I believe that there's further unnecessary spending in government that we can eliminate. But we can't simply cut our way to prosperity. Cutting spending has to go hand in hand with further reforms to our tax code so that the wealthiest corporations and individuals can't take advantage of loopholes and deductions that aren't available to most Americans. And we can't keep cutting things like basic research and new technology and still expect to succeed in a 21st century economy. So we're going to have to continue to move forward in deficit reduction, but we have to do it in a balanced way, making sure that we are growing even as we get a handle on our spending. Now, one last point I want to make. While I will negotiate over many things, I will not have another debate with this Congress over whether or not they should pay the bills that they've already racked up through the laws that they passed. Let me repeat. We can't not pay bills that we've already incurred. If Congress refuses to give the United States government the ability to pay these bills on time, the consequences for the entire global economy would be catastrophic, far worse than the impact of a fiscal cliff. People will remember back in 2011, the last time this course of action was threatened, our entire recovery was put at risk. Consumer confidence plunged, business investment plunged, growth dropped. We can't go down that path again. Now, today's agreement enshrines, I think, a principle into law that will remain in place as long as I am president. The deficit needs to be reduced in a way that's balanced. Everyone pays their fair share. Everyone does their part. That's how our economy works best. That's how we grow. The sum total of all the budget agreements we've reached so far proves that there is a path forward, that it is possible, if we focus not on our politics, but on what's right for the country. And the one thing that I think hopefully in the new year we'll focus on is seeing if we can put a package like this together with a little bit less drama, a little less brinksmanship, not scare the heck out of folks quite as much. We can come together as Democrats and Republicans to cut spending and raise revenue in a way that reduces our deficit, protects our middle class, provides ladders into the middle class for everybody who's willing to work hard. We can find a way to afford the investments that we need to grow and compete. We can settle this debate, or at the very least, not allow it to be so all-consuming all the time that it stops us from meeting a host of other challenges that we face. Creating jobs, boosting incomes, fixing our infrastructure, fixing our immigration system, protecting our planet from the harmful effects of climate change, boosting domestic energy production, protecting our kids from the horrors of gun violence. It's not just possible to do these things, it's an obligation to ourselves and to future generations. And I look forward to working with every single member of Congress to meet this obligation in the new year. And I hope that everybody now gets at least a day off, I guess, or a few days off, so that people can refresh themselves, because we're going to have a lot of work to do in 2013. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
I'm Brian Deese from the National Economic Council. We just completed a major fiscal deal in Washington. And so I want to walk you through what was in that deal, who got what, and what it means for our economy. So the deal that the President just signed makes major progress in all four of these areas. Let's start with taxes for the middle class. Without this deal, taxes were scheduled to go up by about $2,200 for the typical middle class family. Because of this deal, that's not going to happen. Instead, we are going to make permanent low rates for middle class families. In addition, this deal continues important tax credits for working families called the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. These put money in the pockets of families that need it the most and help our economy as well. And finally, this deal fixes something that's called the alternative minimum tax, which has been plaguing our tax code for decades. It's complex, and it threatened to hit lots of middle-class families. For the first time in more than 20 years, we have Democrats and Republicans coming together to vote for a bipartisan tax increase that will help us pay for the things we need and move the economy forward. It has a couple of components. The first is that for the wealthiest Americans, the top tax rate that they pay is going to return to where it was during the Clinton administration. Second, the rates on capital gains and dividend income are going to go up as well. And when you combine what happened with this deal with the capital gains and dividend rate increases that were in the Affordable Care Act, the health care reform bill, then going forward, people making over $250,000 will pay about a 19% on their capital gains and dividend income, and people making over $450,000 will pay about a 24% rate. Third, the tax benefits that the wealthiest Americans receive in the form of deductions and exemptions will be slowly reduced, starting at $250,000 in income. And fourth, the tax rate that the wealthiest estates, the largest estates in this country pay, will increase from 35% to 40%. If you step back and you look at these two pieces together, making the tax code permanently pro-middle class and making sure that the wealthy pay a little bit more back to what they were paying in the Clinton administration, what this deal does is makes the tax code as progressive as it has been in decades. Now third, this was a deal about taxes, but it was about more than that as well. First, it gives companies a strong incentive to make the investments that they need to create jobs next year by both extending tax credits like the R&E tax credit and allowing companies to write off half of any new capital expenses that they make next year. Second, this deal extends a critically important tax credit called the production tax credit, which provides renewable power companies an incentive to make the investments they need to grow. Third, this deal extends a tax credit that we call the American Opportunity Tax Credit. But what it does is it gives every person who's trying to go to college the potential to receive a $2,500 tax credit, if they're eligible, to help defray the cost of college. And finally, this deal extends unemployment insurance for a full year so that those people who are out there looking every day to find a job in an economy that is still very tough have those benefits in their pocket and that our economy benefits from the spending that those unemployment benefits generate. And finally, the President has been focused for a long time now on reducing our deficit, which is the difference between the amount that we spend and the amount that we're taking in tax revenue, in a balanced, responsible way. Without this deal, the wealthy were paying lower taxes. Now, with this deal in place, they're going to pay a little bit more, and that additional amount helps contribute to reducing the deficit in the future. And when you take into account all of the provisions that we've talked about here, it's not a trivial amount of money. In fact, if you, based on estimates that the Congressional Budget Office has made, and that's the official scorekeeper for these types of things here in Washington, based on their numbers, this deal will reduce the deficit by about $740 billion over the next 10 years. And this $740 billion is important because it comes on top of the deficit reduction efforts we've already made. And last year, through the Budget Control Act and prior spending bills, this President has already signed into law $1.7 trillion in spending reductions. We are building the foundation for the kind of balanced deficit reduction that we need. Now, the President has said he wants to do more. He believes we need to do more. But the important thing that he has made clear through this deal and that he's going to focus on going forward is that deficit reduction needs to be balanced. Any additional spending cuts need to be coupled with additional revenue increases because that's the right way to do deficit reduction, and that's what we've shown in the context of this deal. So that's basically what came out of the fiscal cliff. I know it can be very confusing. There's a lot of back and forth. But at the end of the day, the important things to remember are this. Middle-class families are going to see continued lower tax rates because of this deal. The wealthiest Americans are going to go back to paying about the same amount of taxes that they paid during the Clinton administration. We're going to do a couple really important things to keep our economy growing and help clean energy manufacturing and those who are desperately looking for work here in America. And finally, we've made another important contribution to reducing our deficit in a balanced way. We've got a lot more to do, but this is a very important step for our economy and for middle-class families.